Have you ever met someone who just isn't on social media? No Instagram. No TikTok. No Twitter. You search their name and nothing. It's like they exist in some parallel universe where algorithms don't whisper in their ear and notifications don't tug at their sleeve every 5 minutes. And if you're honest, your first thought might be, that's weird. Or maybe, they must be hiding something. Or even, how do they survive without it? Because in our world, being offline feels almost unnatural. Suspicious. Like showing up to a party without a phone. But here's the psychological twist. People who don't use social media aren't necessarily antisocial, outdated, or disconnected. In many cases, their brains are just wired differently. Or more precisely, they've chosen to engage with their brain differently. And once you understand why, it changes how you see both them and yourself. Let's start with something simple. Imagine 2 mornings. In the first, you wake up and before your eyes fully open, your thumb is already scrolling. Notifications. Likes. A message from someone you barely know. A news headline designed to spike your cortisol. A stranger's vacation photo that makes your own life feel slightly smaller. In the second morning, there's silence. No scrolling. Maybe coffee. Maybe sunlight. Maybe boredom. Most of us are living in the first morning. People who don't use social media are choosing the second. Now, this isn't about superiority. It's about psychology. Social media platforms are engineered around one core principle: variable reward. It's the same mechanism used in slot machines. You don't know what you'll get when you refresh. Maybe a like. Maybe nothing. Maybe something outrageous. Your brain loves uncertainty with potential reward. It releases dopamine not just when you get something, but when you anticipate something. And that anticipation becomes addictive. So when someone opts out, they're stepping away from a dopamine loop most of us are swimming in daily. That alone changes a lot. But here's where it gets deeper. People who don't use social media often score higher in what psychologists call internal locus of control. That's just a fancy way of saying they feel their life is shaped more by their own actions than by external validation. They don't rely as heavily on outside feedback to feel secure. Think about it. If you don't post your achievements, who validates them? If you don't share your thoughts publicly, who reacts? If no one sees your vacation, does it still count? For some people, that idea feels uncomfortable. For others, it feels freeing. There's something psychologically powerful about doing things that don't need an audience. It creates a quieter identity. One that isn't constantly being performed. Now, of course, not everyone off social media is a Zen monk living in digital enlightenment. Some people avoid it because of anxiety, social comparison, past harassment, overwhelm. And that matters too. Research on social comparison theory shows that when we're exposed to curated highlight reels, our brains automatically compare. Even if we logically know the images are filtered, staged, and selectively posted, emotionally we still measure ourselves against them. We don't compare our worst moments to their worst moments. We compare our behind the scenes to their highlight reel. And over time, that erodes self-esteem. People who don't use social media often report lower levels of this constant comparison. Their reference group shrinks back to their real-life circle. Fewer artificial benchmarks. Fewer invisible competitions. It's like running a race without constantly glancing sideways. There's also the attention factor. Your brain has a limited attentional budget. Every notification, every scroll, every micro-interruption fragments it. Neuroscientists talk about something called attention residue. When you switch tasks, like from writing an email to checking Instagram, a part of your brain stays stuck on the previous task for a while. You're never fully here or fully there. Now imagine living without that constant switching. Longer stretches of uninterrupted thought. Deeper conversations without glancing at a buzzing screen. Boredom that actually leads to creativity because your brain is forced to wander instead of consume. People who don't use social media often protect their attention fiercely. Not because they're saints, but because they recognize attention as a resource. And here's something subtle but powerful. When you're not online, your social world becomes smaller, but often deeper. There's no passive connection. No. I saw your story, so we're kind of in touch. If you want to know how someone is, you ask. You call. You meet. It requires more effort. But it also creates more intimacy. Digital connection gives us breadth. Offline living often gives depth. And depth is psychologically nourishing in a way scrolling rarely is. But let's flip this for a moment. Sometimes people who don't use social media are reacting, not choosing. Maybe they felt overwhelmed by the noise. Maybe they noticed their mood dipping after every scroll. Maybe they found themselves obsessively checking who viewed their story. Maybe they realized they were living for documentation instead of experience. So they stepped back. And that decision itself tells you something important. It tells you they're paying attention to their inner signals. That's emotional intelligence. There's a quiet confidence in saying, "This doesn't work for me," even when everyone else is doing it. And yet, let's not romanticize it either. There are trade-offs. Social media can build careers, create communities, spark movements. It allows marginalized voices to be heard. It connects long-distance friends. It's not inherently evil. It's a tool. The psychological question isn't, is social media bad? It's, how does it interact with your particular brain? Some people thrive on the stimulation. They use it intentionally. They create more than they consume. They log off without spiraling. Others notice subtle shifts. Restlessness. Envy. Anxiety. The feeling of being watched. The pressure to brand themselves. And here's something fascinating. When you don't use social media, you also become harder to categorize. There's no feed summarizing your personality. No pinned posts. No algorithm shaping how others see you. You become mysterious. And psychologically, mystery creates space. Space for others to project. Space for real discovery and conversation. Instead of someone saying, "Oh, I saw you went to that place," they ask, "So what have you been up to?" And you get to tell it in your own words, not through a filtered square. There's also a boundary element here. Choosing not to be on social media can be a declaration of privacy in a culture of exposure. It's saying, not everything needs to be shared. And that boundary can protect mental health in ways we underestimate. Because every time you post, there's a tiny vulnerability. Will it be liked? Ignored? Misunderstood? Without posting, you remove that micro-stress. Over months and years, that matters. But maybe the most important psychological shift is this: people who don't use social media often anchor their identity more internally than externally. Their sense of self isn't continuously mirrored back through likes, comments, and metrics. It's shaped through lived experience, private reflection, close relationships. That doesn't make them better. It makes them differently reinforced. And here's the uncomfortable reflection. If the idea of deleting your accounts makes you anxious, what exactly are you afraid of losing? Connection? Opportunity? Validation? Visibility? That question alone reveals how deeply social media intertwines with identity. Because for many of us, it's not just a tool. It's a stage. So when someone steps off that stage entirely, it can feel radical. But maybe it's not radical. Maybe it's just selective. Maybe they've chosen to live with less noise. Or maybe they've simply noticed how their nervous system reacts, and adjusted accordingly. The real lesson isn't that you should delete everything tomorrow. It's that awareness matters. Are you using social media? Or is it using you? Are you connecting? Or comparing? Are you expressing? Or performing? People who don't use social media force us to confront those questions. Their absence highlights our habits. And maybe that's why they seem so intriguing. They remind us that the digital default isn't the only way to exist. At the end of the day, psychology isn't about labeling one lifestyle as superior. It's about understanding trade-offs. Brain chemistry. Attention. Identity formation. Some people choose the constant hum of connection. Others choose silence. Both are human. But if you ever feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, or subtly drained after scrolling, that's not weakness. That's information. Your brain giving feedback. And maybe, just maybe, there's power in experimenting. In taking a weekend offline. In noticing what happens to your mood, your focus, your sense of self. You don't have to disappear forever to reclaim your attention. You just have to be conscious. So the next time you meet someone who isn't on social media, instead of thinking they're disconnected, maybe consider this. They might simply be deeply connected somewhere else. To their time. To their thoughts. To the people physically in front of them. And if you are that person, the one who stepped away, you're not weird. You're not behind. You're not invisible. You've just chosen a different feedback loop. And in a world built on constant broadcasting, choosing privacy can be its own quiet form of power. If this made you reflect even a little, I'd love to hear your experience. Are you on social media by choice, by habit, or by pressure? Have you ever taken a break and noticed a difference in your mind? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology behind everyday behaviors, the invisible patterns shaping your decisions, make sure you're subscribed. Because understanding your mind isn't about escaping the modern world. It's about learning how to live in it without losing yourself.